presence of the Lord in this place. God, we give you all glory. I thank you. I thank you for your goodness. I thank you for your mercy to each one of us. I pray your anointing in this place. I pray that you would feed us today, Lord. Help us, God. Help us to be better servants in your kingdom. In Jesus' name. You can be seated. Sister Arnetta, you can come on and help me. Before I forget, please mark your calendars for the last Saturday of this month. That's May 31st. It's going to be Church Cleaning Day. Woo! There are some people who hide when it's time for church work day. And then there are others who are here bright and shiny with their toilet scrubber in hand. So I hope you're the latter and not the former. But I didn't want it to creep up on you and then you be surprised. So May 31st, we'll be announcing it more the closer it gets. Just make sure you don't have any plans that morning. Okay, we'll try to get you out of here as quickly as we can. But we got to keep the house of the Lord looking good. It is our responsibility. And so we're going to work together to keep it nice and clean and repaired and all that. So May 31st. Today, however, we are on the third week of Family Month, and today we are talking about parenting by principle. This is one of those topics that I'm going to have to take a back seat because I've never been a parent. I have been a teacher since, Noah built the ark. But as far as actually having a child of my own, all I can do is go by the way it was when I was growing up. And it's a different world, so it's not quite the same. Now, today was supposed to be Brother Terrence and Sister Arnetta, and they were going to talk from a parent's perspective, from the male point of view, from the female point of view. However, there was a huge emergency at his workplace, and he is having to be there today. But he gave her his notes, so I'm so excited. So we will pretend like he's here. She will read as though he is here. And I'm just grateful for their input and all they've been doing with our children, not just their own, but working with the children in Sunday school and with Bible quizzing. So if anybody knows about children, they do. So let's carry on here. Let's go to Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Ephesians 6:4. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Now, I know those are some big King James words. We'll get into a little bit more of those. But let's go into some of our questions here. Question number 1, what biblical guidelines should inform our approach to parenting? Now, one thing I do know, when I was hoping to be a parent and was praying earnestly and all that, and I'm reading every book and Googling and researching, and you know what? You'll short your brain out doing that. It's like, oh my word, there's way too much information out there. So it's like last week when the Martinezes were here, everything they would say started with prayer. And I'm like, that's how you parent. Everything starts with prayer. So what biblical guidelines, Sister Arnetta, you can let us know if you're talking as yourself or your husband. Push up. Yep.
All right. Sorry. Just need to work out the mics. Before I let you know kind of our side of it, I like to look around the room, and I never want to denigrate the roles of others in parenting. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times you will hear these comments like Sister Lisa shared about, well, I've never been a parent, but but I am a teacher, I am an aunt, I am a friend. And I think first and foremost, in terms of biblical guidelines, we gotta follow the image of God and what God
Mhm.
has showed us.
Right.
And one of the first things that He's told us is that we're not meant to do this alone.
That's good.
And so before even getting into the parent journey, we were looking towards our siblings, our
Mhm.
friends, to figure out, where is our support?
That's true.
How can we walk this journey, supported? Who do we have to reach out to? And the other thing that I always uphold is that when we're in our careers and we're in our different fields, what we learn, if it aligns with the Bible, it's something that we can apply into the family.
Yes.
And teaching and the
Mhm.
concepts of teaching, all of that transfers into our family. So I think the first thing that Terrence and I had done is always using the Bible as our main guide to raising children.
Mhm.
And we had to learn it for ourselves before we could help our children. For me, I always said that how the biblical guidelines that we use should be and apply to our children should be a miniature version of the covenant that we follow.
That's good.
And of course, in bite-sized chunks for children, but in the same way, we learned our principles, we learned our guidelines in bite-sized pieces, and we learned them in a way that is reiterated to us. It's something that um, we tend to get over and over again.
Mhm.
So Terrence was a little bit different. I'm more anecdotal, right? We learn from others. We learn from what we see. We learn from our church family. He used a couple of biblical scriptures. And of course, the first one was Proverbs 22, verse 6. God promises are always an if or and then.
Mhm.
If we obey, then He will deliver.
Mhm.
If we train up our kids, they will never leave from the word. They may stray at times, but will always come back.
That's good.
And so, regardless of what the child does, we must still do our parts as parents in training them up. We prepare them for adulthood and to have a relationship with God.
Mhm.
When they get to the point of understanding, then they will be well equipped. For Deuteronomy 6:7, word of God is constantly in our minds and our hearts.
Mhm.
So we're teaching the word of God to our children diligently. We have Bible studies and conversations with them. And I always say we got to be ready at any moment. Our children are our most closest people we're evangelizing to.
That's true.
And before they can read, as you can really attest to, they're looking, they're absorbing, they're taking all of this in. And you can't be evangelism on the outside,
Right.
and something
Oh,
else.
that's the truth.
Mhm.
That's good.
Yeah. And so we do this very consistently and constantly. We're talking to them when we're relaxing in the house, when we're outside at the store. We look at what they're viewing. We're not there to just rule, but looking at what they're viewing. If there's TV, showing them that there's godly media, giving them those opportunities and having those conversations with them about things that maybe of the world, or maybe things that we don't necessarily follow. We talk of the word when we're out and about. We see people of different cultures. It's not something to degrade others on. It's not and we don't want to promote a heart of hate, right?
Right.
And so when we're talking about other circumstances, it's always from the idea of love. We're
Yes.
showing them that there are different cultures. We're the way we are because we're Christian. We live a certain way because it aligns with the Bible. Others live their way because that is what they know to be their truth. And we ease into topics that way. And then the other thing we try to do is when we go to bed and rise up, we're reflecting on our day. we're keeping that perspective fresh for them.
Yes.
Those moments, we never try to go down on a subject left undiscussed.
That's good. Yes.
Prayer time, reiterating things that we may have seen during the day, or praying for those needs, for those people, and watching Bible stories together, being able to interpret it for our children.
That is great. This is so good. And Brother Jacob has the microphone in case anybody has any comments you want to add to this. In thinking of my own childhood growing up, the biblical guidelines, there were 3 that stood out to me growing up. Number 1, prayer was essential. Prayer was part of our home. If your kids have never heard you pray, it's going to feel awkward at first, but do it because your kids need to hear you pray. I promise they're learning how to pray from listening to you pray. Prayer was always the first thing in anything. It didn't have to be a crisis. If you know how it is, you go on vacation and that's where we want to move to. That city is where we want to move to. My dad would say, well, I think there needs to be some prayer going into that. It was his way of saying, don't go there. Don't be stupid. Prayer was the first thing. Number 2 was building a strong community. I realized that with the group we have here, all of you have different backgrounds. Some of you have more baggage than others. Some of you, family does not bring happy memories. And then for some of you, family is everything. But with the family you have right now, if possible, build a strong community and let that community also be part of the church. So the family, you feel that connection with the church. And the third thing, grace and forgiveness. If you're holding something over someone's head from something they did 15 years ago, that's not grace and forgiveness. And that's one thing that I was so thankful for. My dad used to say he had an instant forgiver, which meant somebody did something wrong, I forgive them. I don't wait for them to ask forgiveness. I go ahead and forgive them, clear it. And as far as I'm concerned, it's done, it's over with, it's clear. Sister Arnetta, Nanette, sorry. Yes.
Well, what Sister Arnetta said about, and you've said before about kids observing, you do not realize what your kids observe. And like you said, we didn't grow up in this. But there were times when we were first getting started, Mike and I would discuss between ourselves about how we were going to manage tithing properly. We never really discussed it with the girls, and I never realized how much they paid attention to those conversations until they were older, and they were, like Leah has a bank account that we move money back and forth. So I can see her bank account. Lindy has talked to me, and I never realized that my kids had picked up on this, and they themselves are now decent tithers and stuff because they were watching us. And so it is what you do in the home where nobody else but your kids see you.
Right. That's the truth. That's good. And that is a great segue for question number 2. How can parents effectively model Christian values to their children? So you have this pressure of being this parent and you want to show Christian values. How can you do that?
So for us, it wasn't necessarily having a plan, because I very quickly learned that those baby books are not real. And not to shun anyone who's looking at those or using them for research, but it's almost like they intentionally leave out all the real parts of parenting just so that people keep that desire and that optimism alive. And so what we did going into it was to really look into our why. Why are we here?
That's
What
good.
is our purpose?
Mm-hmm.
Because the last thing we wanted to do is to say, I'm just doing this for my children.
Uh-huh.
I personally was a byproduct of that,
Oh.
and I knew how that felt.
Uh-huh.
And I share this all the time. My dad struggled with alcoholism. And so as a crux for that, my family would say, do this for your children. Do whatever it was that we needed him to do, it was do this for your children, do this for your children. And like Sister Nanette said, you never know what your children are observing and what they're
Right.
learning. And every time I would hear his siblings or someone say that to him to encourage him, I internalized, what do I need to do? I got to do this for my dad. I got to do this for
All right.
and
That's
it's
good.
yeah, and it started to put these expectations
Mm-hmm.
there that didn't necessarily have to be there.
Right.
And we know we fall short as humans.
Mm-hmm.
And so when those failures arose and when people were kind of naturally who they were, I internalized that.
Right.
And I lost my why. Well, why do I have to go to church if my dad's not going?
All right. That's good.
And so when we had children, we really evaluated, well, we say that we're doing this for God, but how evident is that? And that was when we realized, when you're by yourself and you're single, you don't have kids, it's easy. You don't have to explain anything.
That's it.
Yes. and what happened was we looked at what we wanted to model and realized not only do we have to model living a godly life, but we need to be bold out and sold out.
Yes.
Bold and sold out
Yes.
for it. It has to be extra obvious
Mm-hmm.
because they have to see those examples in you.
Right.
And I will say, model wise, it's fluid and it's flexible. So there were convictions that I had, or no, there were convictions that I didn't have that I had once my daughter could articulate it.
Uh-huh.
And I'll use nail polish for example. I was okay with clear nail polish. I
Uh-huh.
said it's not changing my nails colors. It's for a quote unquote purpose. But then my daughter started asking me. She started asking me things like, well, you say that we're not allowed to wear it, like the rules, right?
Uh-huh.
You're saying that we're not allowed to wear it, but you have it. And then I would say, well, it's clear.
Uh-huh.
And then she would say, well, what's the difference of clear and like slightly tinted or light
Ooh.
pink?
Out
Or
of the mouths of babes.
yes.
Woo.
And that really stuck with me.
Uh-huh.
And then I realized that that's exactly how those drifts happen.
Uh-huh.
You start off with clear, it gets a little tinted,
Uh-huh.
gets a little deeper, gets a little darker, right?
Uh-huh.
And when I realized my why is God, I
That's
realized that as much as I loved it, I
Mhm.
loved having the nail polish. It wasn't worth her confusion.
That is so good.
And it wasn't worth her questioning for herself.
Mhm.
So we modeled our living and how we're living. Worship is the other thing,
Mhm.
because there's no surprise that babies can raise their hand very easily,
Mhm.
and then it dimmers.
Uh-huh.
And when it dimmers, we think, well, the kid is growing up, the kid is X, Y, and Z. But it's us. We got to put in that extra effort
That's
to
good,
resonate
yes.
what we want to show, what we want our children to do. And that means, making sure that it's not just in one environment. If we're worshiping at church, we should be worshiping at home in
That's
the same
good.
way.
Yes, absolutely.
Modeling the praying and singing and dancing and giving. We are doing that at home first.
Right.
And so we believe that if we do that, our kids won't live a life. They're not going to be void of that life of worship.
Yes. Mhm.
Parents must lead by example to show what it means to be a Christian. There needs to be a Joshua 25:15 attitude.
Yes.
That no matter what goes on, the family will serve the Lord.
That's good. Yes.
It doesn't matter what happens at work. It doesn't matter what happens at school. It doesn't matter what happens at church. That we're doing what we should for God.
Yes.
And Sister Lisa had also mentioned, and this is really what our kids see, that burned out feeling that you have when you're serving day in and day out, and you're worshiping with your kids. Your kids are going to see that fatigue.
That's right.
And so you have to learn, how do we want to model this? Do we want to show them that when you get tired, you quit? Do we want to show them that when you get tired, you tell?
Oh,
you
that's
share
good.
that.
Yes.
It's okay to acknowledge it, but keep that momentum going, and to make sure that we're not quitters. We're not quitting for the Lord.
Right. That's so good. I saw a quote. Was there somebody over here? I want to make sure I don't miss anyone. Brother Paul, go ahead.
So I don't know if I should mention this now. Those were some really good testimonies Sister Arnetta gave, and I don't want to go from the spirit of that.
No, go ahead.
She just was talking in the beginning of what she was speaking about, how the baby books don't tell the full story and leave out the more maybe troublesome things. And it took me back to when I was considering getting a guide dog before I got Gia. And one of the handlers said, none of the pamphlets talk about what's called park time, where you take the dog outside to do its business, and you have to make sure you have a bag to pick up the number 2. So that's where it took me back to, was that. And I think for me too, one of the things, we don't have children yet, but I'm starting to really learn, is doing things for my wife, even when it's not quote unquote necessary, but it helps her out. And a big example I can think of was, she also grew up in a family of alcoholism. And so before we even became apostolic, back when we were in a denomination where it was okay to do so, I never drank at all, because it just made her uncomfortable, and it was something I was willing to do.
That's
and
good.
So just as a piggyback to those wonderful testimonies of thank you for sharing all that.
These are so good. When I was in college, we had to go through, child psychology, and you have to learn all developmental stages and all this kind of stuff. And something that they taught us, children between the ages of 2 and 5 begin to display morally based behaviors and beliefs. Between 2 and 5, they're starting to figure out what's right and what's wrong. And so if you're waiting until your child's a teenager to, hey, we don't do that, it's too late. The form has already been made in the brain between 2 and 5. So what they see you do, they're understanding what's right and what's wrong. And like Sister Arnetta was talking about, sometimes we can create confusion when the child is thinking, but that's not right, but I see mom doing it. I remember seeing that in my own family, not with mom and dad, but with extended family. I remember being a child and thinking, but that's cheating. And yet, because I held them in such esteem and they were making it okay, it caused a lot of conflict in the mind. So that's something just to keep in mind, is they watch and they mimic. All right, let's go to question number 3. Discuss the balance between discipline and grace. Oh, my word. Discipline and grace. You want to take this away?
So this is where Terrence and I are at the most opposite sides of the spectrum as it could be. And I say this with a grain of salt because I grew up with his family. So I've seen this. But his parents and he, spare not the rod, right? Is a verse that is etched in everyone's hearts. And I'm on the other side of, my mom invented gentle parenting before it had a label on it. And she was like, if you can't use your words to talk to your kids, then, There's that. And so grace wise, I think for us came, we applied the grace to ourselves, not necessarily to our children. We needed the grace, and we needed to really understand that disciplining children looks very different to Terrence and I, and it looks different to everyone else.
Right.
And we had to really understand that, you know, as parents or super aunts, you're hard on yourself. And a lot of times you feel like, especially if you had the different backgrounds growing up, you feel like I'm doing just exactly what I didn't want to do. And I should have done that a different way. I shouldn't have yelled. I shouldn't have raised my voice. You know, I shouldn't have X, Y, and Z. And so for us, the grace came with applying it to ourselves. And once we did that, once we realized, you know what, we're not going to figure this out, and this is okay. We're just going to go through it, and, you know, we're going to stay on track, stay biblically based, but understand that we're human. That grace transferred into our children, and they were able to see what grace was, because we would have to apologize to our children. We would have to say, I am just so sorry. I didn't mean to say what I said. I didn't mean to cut you off before understanding what you were trying to say, why you did something. And we think about biblically our examples with God, and how many times he's let us go through those actions
That's a truth.
before the corrections came. And so that's where our grace applied. Scripturally, Ephesians 6:4, fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, bring them up in that nurture and admonition of the Lord. And so we can't be so quick to discipline our kids that our anger or our emotions take the forefront of actually teaching them. And but at the same time, when it comes to disciplining our children, we both have a no nonsense policy. I don't physically really do anything with my children, but they know it's the opposite with me. If mommy is quiet and mommy's looking at you, that's worse than anything that daddy could do, you know? And so we started them off as soon as they were out of the womb, pretty much, because we gave them boundaries up front. We were very, very consistent with it. We didn't want them doing certain things, and you know, every parent is different. For us, it was our child, our responsibility, and our child should not be running in the aisles. You know, that was our thing. And so we taught our child boundaries. You can go in between mommy and daddy. You cannot go outside. You can occupy yourself. I hope you're listening, but you cannot talk. You can ask questions, they will be addressed, but if pastor is speaking, you're secondary to that. And so we were even from a young age with them, we were very, very consistent in any way that we discipline them. The other thing, and this is just recognizing how everything is evolving. We're educated. We're more educated now than we ever have been before. And so we know there are certain conditions that kids have that are going to, you know, you can't just apply A and hope that it works. And so for us, it was understanding every kid's diverse needs.
That's it.
And for me, it was realizing that, and this is where thank God for the verse about not letting your anger provoke, because there were times where TJ was bouncing off the walls and we couldn't figure out why. And it wasn't until this year that we found out that it was because he had ADHD. So we didn't have that sensitivity and that grace while we were disciplining him. We wouldn't have found out about his true personality, his true characteristics, and how to operate in that in a way to allow him to thrive, not be scared to be who he is.
Do you need him to come and stay in our house for a few days? Because we'll instruct him in the way more perfectly, right? If you're ADD, let me tell you, honey.
So we had that. Grace from Terrence's side, grace must be extended to our children. We give grace through our relationship and understanding our children. We have to remember that they are still learning and they're not developed. It's a process, and we must not bear down on our kids, but understand that there are circumstances where rules may not be a priority. When kids make mistakes, we must make sure that they understand what they did was wrong and gauge how they receive it. But it's also a well-balanced between discipline and grace. And we have to make sure that our kids have those clear guidelines and expectations, that they're comfortable in making mistakes and not feeling the condemnation, but the actual conviction behind their actions. And so this was something we looked at when they were kids. We wanted them to be aware of conviction, so that when they get older, they're a little bit sensitive to it. Conviction will draw them to want to change, but build a stronger family bond. We mirror our Heavenly Father's example of discipline and grace, but we are still understanding that we're children of God. We all make mistakes in a spiritual environment. So it's a balancing act for us.
That's great. And before anybody thinks, I wasn't meaning for TJ to come to our house because we were going to beat him. My poor husband has to deal with 2 ADHD people in the house. And so you learn how to adapt, and he could just, we'll teach him all the little tricks to make him get distracted from things. No, what she was saying, one thing that I did notice, the balance between discipline and grace is that every child's different, and what works on one child may not work on the other child. And that happened with my sister and I. I was the one that if mom said you go this far and no further, I wouldn't even go quite to the line because I didn't want to run the risk of, upsetting or disobeying or whatever. My sister, on the other hand, was going to touch that line and then look at her like, what are you going to do about it? So what worked for me did not work for my sister. In the same way, you were talking about when mom gets quiet. I will never forget, I was 17 years old. I had spent the night at a friend's house, and she was dating a guy in the Orlando church. So we left her house and went down and had dinner with him and his family in Orlando, and then we drove back to her house. Well, I hadn't let mom and dad know that we were going to do that. And they had called her house to ask me something, or I forget what the thing was, and I wasn't there. And her mom proceeded to tell my mom what had happened. So when I got in, and it was pretty late, I went ahead and called, and I will never forget those words when my dad said, "Lisa, I am so disappointed in you. I would rather he had beat me within an inch of my life, get a cat of 9 tails, bring blood, anything," because when he said that, I was crushed and I sobbed and sobbed. And it was horrible. I was like, I will never do that again, I promise. And I promise you, I never went anywhere without letting them know first. If they'd have tried that on my sister, I am so disappointed in you. She'd be like, you're probably going to be disappointed a lot more in my life. That's just the way she was, right? So what works for one may not work for another, but just make sure that it has a biblical foundation there. Let's move on to the last question here. What challenges do parents face today in raising children in the faith? Now, when I saw that question, I thought, we don't have enough hours in the church service to discuss the challenges that parents today are facing, because what we believe and what we teach is the exact opposite of what the world believes and what the world is teaching. So Sister Arnetta, take that one.
So for this one, we have a list, and the list is just revolving around the agenda of the world. There's just no way. There's no way around it. For me, I'm a little bit more appreciative of differences, and I understand how things come about.
Mhm.
Right? We're in different times. Before, especially when we were growing up, we may have had folks who didn't attend church, but somewhere along those lines there were some kind of religious principles, Christian principles, that kept them to a certain extent grounded.
Right.
Now, it's a little bit different. The
Mhm.
kids today may have parents who've never touched the Bible, so they don't have that same kind of awareness of even a lot of the morals that
That's
we may
true.
be so
That is true.
used to. So for us, the biggest thing is the concept of live life like you want to.
Mhm.
And there are three different sayings that you see floating around, and it's not an accident. Follow your heart.
Uh-huh.
Not all who wander are lost. Not all who wander are lost is my pet peeve, because here's the thing. The symbol is a map when you're exploring, right?
Right.
Exploring is intentional. You're
Mhm.
intentionally going into new lands. You may not know the land, but you know where you're going. You know where you're coming from.
Uh-huh.
You know where you're coming from is the thing. Not all who wander are lost. Well, where are the others? If you're not lost, you're drifting.
All right.
Because wandering is the process of a drift.
Uh-huh.
You're traveling with a compass, so you know the direction you may be headed to, but you
Mhm.
don't know the way back.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of times it's set without a guide or grounding. And so that's why you see those stickers, and it says not all who wander are lost, and it's a compass. It's not a map.
Uh-huh.
And it's for that exact reason. So we have to be careful of those little societal sayings that are easy to remember, get etched in
Uh-huh.
our hearts, but have a different meaning. The other concept is everyone is correct as long as you're just.
Oh.
LGBTQIA plus movement, right? It's not uncommon. It's really not uncommon for the children nowadays to have the parents, to have the peers with parents that are moms, dads.
Uh-huh.
And there has to be a way to invite that kid over to your house, be able to evangelize him,
Yes.
but not in a way that's producing hate in his
That's
heart
right.
while
Yes.
you're shining your light.
Uh-huh.
And so kids who want to be transgender, or parents who are pushing them to be transgender, understanding that there's mental concepts behind that
Mhm.
that have to be understood as well. Screening all material before letting your kids use it, or
Oh, yes.
yeah, that's a big thing for the little ones.
Oh, yes.
Or for if they're older, setting those guidelines in place so that you hope that they would do it.
Mm-hmm.
For us, because our children are still younger, we have parent controls on everything.
Uh-huh.
And we're not afraid to shy away from that. So if it's their phones, it's their video games, TV, they all have limits on that. And understanding that the biggest thing for us is realizing that these things are not automatic.
Mhm.
Your child isn't going to just get it because you're showing up.
Right.
And knowing that it takes that time and investment to put those controls in, but it's the long-term goals that we got to be aware of.
Yes. Thank you for saying our children are not just going to get it. There is a well-known pastor in the United Pentecostal Church who was here in Virginia a few years ago, and the ministers were doing like a round table kind of thing, asking questions, and they were saying, what is the one thing you would do different if you could go back? And he said, I wish I would have taken my time to teach my children why we believe what we believe. He said, I just assumed they got it because we went to church all the time. And the one is about as far left as you can possibly go because they just assumed. So I can't stress this enough. Take the time to teach your children. I remember us having little family devotions in our home. I still remember those so many years later. So don't take it for granted that, well, they're not going to remember. They're not going to comprehend anything. Trust me, they will. If I can carry on with some of the challenge is balancing faith and busy schedules, because you can get so caught up in all the busy schedules that you do lose that family devotion and the training and that sort of thing. It's easy to get caught up in, well, we've got soccer practice and we've got this practice and we've got to be over here and we've got PTA this night and we've got this and this and this. You know what? Let's just not go to church tonight. Let's just take a break. Worst possible scenario, okay? Please, I know you're exhausted mentally, physically, emotionally, everything, but please don't be teaching your children that it's okay just to miss tonight so we can rest. I promise you, it's not going to end the way you want it to. She was talking about social media, or she was talking about electronic devices, and that we need a whole hour just to talk about that. We're not going to do that. We have 3 minutes left. I cannot imagine trying to raise a child in today's society with all the different social media platforms that are out there and what's allowed to be posted and shared on those social media programs. I can't even imagine. And I'm not even talking about little children. The Martinezes have grown children, and yet I still think that's got to be so hard today to try to raise teenagers in today's society because it's so common. Your child goes to school and everyone else in the class is on TikTok and they're going, what is TikTok? Then they get made fun of. Then they come home and they're crying because everybody else has TikTok and I don't even know what it is. It's okay to shelter your children. It's okay. I am a product of being sheltered, let me tell you. And yes, you do step out in the real world and it smacks you upside the face, but I had that foundation that she was talking about earlier from the time of childbirth. And if you are just new to this and you haven't had a chance to train up your child from birth, start now. Have family devotions now. This Tuesday, remember, this Tuesday, there's no men's prayer because we want family dinner, family time, talk, get together, discuss your day, close those mental tabs in the brain of what all happened today. So, do we have any more comments before we close this out? Sister Debbie, yes.
I agree with everything you say. I have 2 adult children, 42 and 36 now, and they were brought up going to church. We didn't attend every Sunday, but they still go to church today. The thing I wanted to address is single parenting.
Oh, yes.
I have been a single parent pretty much all their life, and it was difficult and very hard.
Yeah.
And I was raised with an iron fist where you don't speak unless you're spoken to, and there was prices to pay. I didn't raise my children like that, but all I had to do was snap my finger and point at them, and they knew I meant business. That was the father side of me.
Yes.
The thing I learned about children, teaching them and having them, is that their opinions matter.
Yes.
And to be quiet, sometimes you just want to override them because
Yes.
you know more than they know. But their opinions really matter, and their
that's good.
problems are real.
Uh-huh.
And if you just take the time to listen to what they have to say instead of what you want to say, you get to the problem a lot quicker.
That is the truth.
Yes, you do.
Yes.
And I think that this is a great lesson for everybody. As they grow up, they go through so many trials and tribulations of their own. Their influences are so great out there in the world, even still today. And it's very difficult to tell them you can't do this and you can't do that, because me being a rebel, because my parents were dysfunctional alcoholics. So when I grew up, I was out of that house
Uh-huh.
and into the world.
Uh-huh.
And then I realized by, growing up myself with things that it's not always about you.
That's good.
It's not. It's about, when you have children, it's about them.
Mm-hmm.
And your influence and what you guide and direct them to do and be, they will be. So you
Uh-huh.
have to be real careful about things they see.
Mm-hmm.
You have to talk to them. You have to take time with them to talk to them to find out what their issues are.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you for sharing that. You were talking about their feelings are real. They are authentic. I will never forget the time I was 14 and I was in love. This was it. I just knew this was the one at 14. And I remember when it all came crashing down and I was crying, and my dad was quick to be like, get over it. And Mom said, Lisa, I understand that your feelings were, you're really real and you're really hurting right now. Y'all, it's been 110 years ago that happened. And I remember it like it was yesterday because it meant something to me that she was validating what I was feeling. You know how dads are the quick to brush it off, but Mom was like, I get where you're coming from. So thank you for sharing that. It is real. Let them know that you understand it's real. Thank you so much. This has been great. We are 1 minute over. Thank you all for being here. And we're going to take a 14